Hey there, my little darklings. It's Skitty, your shop girl to the spooks and the specters. Today's story comes from the twisted, brilliant mind of Matt Looney and the ever-growing town of Ashford. It starts quiet, like most things do, but stay with me, because what walks through the door might not be what you expect. Let's begin with the Etch-A-Sketch Experiment. The little bell above the door hadn't jingled all morning. This was not entirely unusual, as the traffic at Ashford Antiques was slow but steady. Proprietor Harry Truman, not the president, puttered around the store, dusting and repositioning items to catch the eye, and changing the occasional price if he deemed the item more of a fixture than an item for sale. Around noon, Harry parked himself behind the counter near the antique register that every antique store seems to have, and pulled his lunch pail from a hidden shelf. From it, he produced a wax paper wrap sandwich that his wife had lovingly prepared that morning. The wax paper was sealed with one of her little heart stickers, her signature move. Along with the sandwich, his lunch pail included a little plastic box with all of his afternoon meds and an apple. It used to be a bag of chips. He missed his bag of chips, but he was rounding the corner to 60, and his wife had started packing apples instead. At least it wasn't a bran muffin. Harry sat eating his sandwich and watching a furniture restoration video on his phone, occasionally looking out the front windowed wall of the shop as someone walked down the sidewalk, hoping they might come in. Just as the video was getting to the reveal portion to show the craftsman's finished product, the store began to rumble. It wasn't thunder or a train rolling down the tracks nearby. It seemed like a legitimate earthquake, something very unusual for Ashford. It faded as quickly as it started, only lasting for about 8 or 9 seconds. Harry looked around the store to make sure nothing had fallen or had been damaged, and then turned his attention back to his phone. "Hello?" a voice called out. It startled Harry enough to drop his phone on the rubber mat below. He looked up and saw a man standing in his showroom. He was dressed in a white dress shirt, tie, and slacks, but no shoes. The clothes had a good amount of wear on them, as did the man's face. Substantial stubble growth and tousled brown hair going gray put the ensemble of down on his luck together perfectly. "Jumpin' Jesus!" Harry called out, involuntarily stepping back a foot or two. "Where'd you come from?" The stranger just stood there, as if he hadn't heard the shopkeeper even speak. He just looked around the room, wide-eyed. It seemed like he was startled as well. Still, he did not speak. Catching his breath and his wits, Harry cleared his throat. "Sorry about that." He made his way to the end of the counter, but kept it between them. "I just didn't hear the bell when you came in, is all." At this point, the stranger looked at the front door, puzzled. "I didn't either." "Oh, okay," Harry replied, still very wary. The stranger continued, I don't remember coming in," he said, looking back at Harry. "Where is this place?" Harry's demeanor changed. "You're not high, are you?" "I don't think so," the man said, stepping toward an ornate chair nearby. "I am dizzy, though. Do you mind if I sit?" No, Harry gave him a wave of the hand. "You go ahead, sit yourself down. I don't need you tipping over into something expensive." He gave a little laugh. The man didn't seem to notice. He put his hand on the back of the chair and sat, slowly. He kept blinking as though he were trying to clear his head or remember something. "Where are your shoes, son?" Harry asked. The man looked down at his feet. "Where are my goddamn shoes?" He looked up at Harry, who looked at him with wide eyes. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend." "Oh, that's okay," Harry said, finally coming around the counter. "I've heard it all before." He came to stand closer to the man, still keeping an antique chocolate table between them. "You say you don't know how you got here?" The stranger shook his head. "I don't even know where I was before this," he said, looking up at Harry. "Where am I?" "Well, you're in the, finest antique store in the county. I'm Harry Truman, not the president, of course, the proprietor," he said with some pride. "These are antiques?" the man said, glancing around the room, his head still foggy. Harry narrowed his eyes. "Well, yeah," he said, pointing to the chair he was sitting in. "Son, that chair's over 100 years old." "Oh, okay," the man said. "What's your name?" Harry asked. Clarity sprouted on the stranger's face, but not the good kind. He was certain he knew the answer to that question, but he didn't. "Oh, shit. I don't know who I am either." He looked up at Harry. "What's happened to me?" Harry moved a little closer. "I hate to tell you, son, but I think you might have gotten mugged. You got a wallet or anything of value on you? That might be why you don't have any shoes on now either." The man searched his pockets. Nothing. "Well, that's it, my friend," Harry said, finally coming to stand beside the stranger. "You got mugged, sure as Sunday, and they must have rung your bell good since your memory's on the fritz. I think we should call the cops. Maybe they can help." "Yes, that's probably best," the stranger said. He was rubbing his hands through his hair over his scalp, feeling for anything that might be sore. Harry headed back behind the counter. "You just rest yourself there. I'll go get Dean or Sam over here and give you a look-see. I'm not sure which one it'll be, though. I can't remember which one patrols the east side of Ashford on Tuesdays." "Thanks for the help," the man said, disappointed he hadn't found an injury to his head. "No worries," Harry assured him. "I'll get them on their way over here, and then I'll see about getting you some eyes for your head." "Thanks," the man said. Not finding any injury to his head, he felt around the rest of his body to see if maybe he had been hurt in some other way. He found nothing. He started searching his pockets again, looking for anything that might give him a clue to who he was or where he had come from. He came up empty again. Finding himself no longer dizzy, he stood and walked toward the front door. He squinted at the brightness of the sun-bathed street. Nothing out there looked familiar. Across the street was a park, a consignment store, a vape shop, and down a little bit was a diner. No memories were triggered. He could have been standing in any rural town in America. He closed his eyes and let the darkness wash over him after the brightness of the street. Dim swirls of color bounced side to side as bits of light seeped through the closed lids. He searched those swirls for anything, any memory or familiar shape, or familiar face perhaps. Nothing. Wait, what was that? He concentrated on the spirals and the eddies that were created by the light and the fluid in his eyes. It wasn't just once either. Twice he saw them, golden arcs stretched wide like, "Okay now, Sam's coming to take a look at you and see what we can come up with." He was brought back to the present with the sound of Harry's voice behind him. The stranger turned around, opening his eyes. It took a few seconds for his eyes to adjust. He thought he might see them again in the shadows of the store, but nothing. Had it even been real? "Not only do I have no memory, I think I'm crazy." "What's that now?" Harry asked. "I guess it's nothing," the man said, coming to sit back on the chair again. He kept glancing back at the street outside. He let out a big sigh as he sat down. "Thanks, Harry. I appreciate your help." "Not a problem. Don't you worry now. We'll get you all sorted out," Harry said with an encouraging grin. "Now, let me go find you some eyes for that head of yours." A few minutes after Harry disappeared in the back room, the bell above the door rang. That's when the man with the gun showed up. "Back of the store, right now," the young man said. He was wearing a hoodie and blue jeans. His hand was in one of the pockets, thrust forward towards the memory-impaired man sitting in the ornate chair near the counter. The man with no memory turned slowly and looked at the would-be thief with curiosity. He stood, brow furrowed, as he studied the assailant. "What do you want?" "I want you to do what I say," the hooded man answered. It was at this time Harry emerged from the storeroom with a plastic bag filled with ice cubes wrapped in a paper towel. "Well, it's not exactly hospital grade, I admit, but it should do in a pinch," he said, still oblivious to the new development. "I think, if you don't mind, I'm going to call you Joe until we find out who you really are. There was this baseball player 100 years ago. They called him Shoeless Joe Jackson. It's a funny story. Harry, you have a visitor." Harry looked up and jerked, dropping his makeshift cold pack. "Goodness gracious!" He raised his hand slightly in a surrendering gesture. "Get the money," the robber said. "What money?" Harry asked. "The money in the register, the money in the safe, any money you got," he replied, finally taking his hand out of his pocket to reveal an old revolver. Harry cleared his throat. "Ugh, I'm sorry to say, but this ain't a cash-heavy business. The register doesn't even work," he said, pointing to the ornate counting machine on the counter. "It's just for looks." "Stop lying, old man," the gunman threatened, shaking his gun at the two men. Harry flinched before continuing. "I'm not lying, son. Everything in here is very expensive, but most people write checks or use their credit cards. I don't even have a cash box behind the counter." "You gotta be goddamn kidding me," the hooded figure said under his breath. The man with no memory, Joe, just stared at him in surprise and wonder, but no fear crossed his face. He might have as well been watching everything on television, just wondering what was going to happen next. "Okay," the gunman shouted, "give me your wallets, and, he started looking around the room. "Tell me what's valuable that I can carry out with me." All right," Harry said, reaching for his wallet. As he did so, he realized his was the only wallet on that side of the room. That was not going to make the assailant happy. "You too, businessman," the man in the hoodie demanded. "He doesn't have one," Harry pleaded. "Yeah, I don't have one," Joe said, snapping out of his TV show. He looked at Harry, who was terrified. "Harry, don't give this asshole your wallet." This response took everyone by surprise, even the man that said it. "Don't cause trouble, Joe," Harry pleaded. "Can't you see this man's just been mugged? He doesn't even have shoes," he pointed at Joe's feet. "Jesus Christ, fine," the man said. "Just hand me over the wallet." "Don't you dare, Harry," Joe said, studying the gunman. "I doubt that thing's even loaded." Harry's arm was outstretched, the wallet shaking in his hand. Joe reached over, putting a hand on Harry's arm, and lowered it. "You need to leave," Joe said, addressing the gunman. His demeanor had made a 180-degree turn. He had gone from confused to amused to sinister in a matter of seconds. "Give me the wallet," the young man said, now realizing something had changed. Even the hair on the back of his neck was standing up. He tried to keep it together, though. "Give it to me, or I shoot the old man." "The fuck you will," Joe said, coming to stand in front of Harry. Gentlemen, Harry spoke in a worried tone. "Let's just give him the wallet so he can be going." "No," Joe said, staring down the gunman with rage in his eyes. The room began to feel energized, as if there were a Tesla coil in the back room no one could see. Even the gunman started to back away, noticing the change. Give me..." The thief couldn't even finish his request. "Please," Harry said. "The police are already on their way." "Wait, what?" The gun went off with a deafening crack, the hot slug tearing through the space between them. In a blur of motion, too fast to track, Joe snatched the bullet from the air without hesitation. without even acknowledging the force it carried. He didn't slow. Instead, he barreled forward, crashing into the unsuspected gunman with enough force to send him hurtling backward through the glass front door. The safety glass shattered, scattering hundreds of jagged shards over the unconscious thief sprawled on the sidewalk. There was an incredible silence after the last glass shards tumbled to the ground. Joe remained crouched, exactly as he'd landed after sending the robber through the front door. He couldn't take his eyes off the young man on the sidewalk. The door hung open around him, the glass gone, but for a few crumbles clinging to the seams. It seemed as though centuries passed as both he and Harry stood looking at the young man. Harry was the first to break the silence. You okay, Joe? Joe's head whipped around. He still stood in a crouched position. Harry's voice had brought him back from somewhere deep in his mind. What? Harry raised his hands in an open display of trust, letting his posture speak where his words might fail. He didn't know what to expect next. I just wanted to make sure you're all right, he said, taking a step towards Joe. I know I heard the gun go off. I thought you'd been shot. Joe finally stood straight again, the anticipation of further danger eroding from his mind. No, I'm okay. He looked himself over and finally focused on his hands. Both of them clenched. He found a bullet in one and a gun in the other. The sight of the gun startled him, and without any thought, he tossed it over onto a short pile of rugs stacked nearby. He half expected it to go off again. His heart racing, he looked back to Harry. I don't know how I did that. He looked down at the bullet in his hand. It was terribly misshapen, as if not only did it hit something hard that stopped it, but also crushed it under enormous pressure. Harry came to stand beside him, his gaze also going to the bullet. That's impossible. Joe looked back at the man on the ground. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted him to stop. I'm sorry about your door. Don't you worry about the door, Harry said. I've got some plywood in the back that I can... His train of thought spiraled out of his grasp. What are you, Joe? The thought hit Joe like a splash of cold water to the face. He almost looked offended. The fact that he could be anything but a regular human had not, until then, entered his mind. What do you mean? I'm sorry, son, but no man I've ever heard of can do what you just did. Yeah, but I didn't even know I could. His voice trailed. Let's face it, you don't know much right now, Harry said bluntly. Well, yeah, Joe admitted, but who's ever heard of anything like that? He said, pointing back out to the still unconscious man laying half in the doorway. That's like superhero shit. As they looked out the door, a police car came into view and parked in front of the store. A policeman exited the car slowly. He wore a cautious look and had his hand on his sidearm. Damn, Harry, looks like a tornado came through. You all right? Oh, hi, Sam. Harry gave Joe a wide-eyed glance. Well, it's not what I called you here for, but it's a good thing you showed up. This fella here tried to rob the store. Sam approached the unconscious man, glass crunching under his shoes. You hit him hard with a bat or something? Harry laughed nervously, a little too loud. No, he said, walking past Joe. Under his breath, he added, I've got this, and gave him a reassuring look. Grabbing a book about architecture from a nearby table, Harry flung it on top of the gun that was still sitting on the stack of rugs. Raising his voice again, he continued, Yeah, it was the craziest thing. He came in all wide-eyed and yelling, but when I told him you were already on your way, He freaked out and headed to the door. I guess he slipped on the rug there and just plump slammed into it." Sam knelt and checked for a pulse on the would-be robber. "Whoa, yeah, seems like he's out cold," he said, standing. "I bet that was something to see." "Yeah, it was something," Harry agreed. Sam grabbed the radio on his shoulder and pressed the button. "Gloria, this is Unit 2. I'm going to need EMS over here at Harry's place on Denton. We've got an unconscious male in his early 20s, I'd say." The radio squelched, with a female voice responding, and Harry turned back to his new friend, giving him a wink. Across the street, 2 men stood on the roof of the vape shop, taking in the whole scene unfolding at the antique store. Both wore suits, or what was meant to look like suits, but wasn't. One had a fair complexion and the other dark. "I told you," the fair one spoke. "What did you tell me?" the dark-skinned one asked. "I told you it didn't matter," the first one said, turning to face him. "It's not preordained, Seraphiel." Seraphiel's jaw tightened. "Is that a fact?" He finally looked at the other, something cautious flickering behind his eyes. "Then tell me, what exactly do you think you've just shown me?" "The choice exists, even for those of our kind," the other said. "Maybe you don't understand what you've witnessed." "My mind is clear, Alarian. Maybe I just don't understand what you wish to do with this information you think you've discovered." "What is my plan?" Alarian asked. "Enlighten me," Seraphiel said, knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "I've just shown you that when stripped down to a blank slate, when we are essentially free of influence, we can do anything, dark or light. We can break from what we have been conditioned to do. You've just witnessed a demon, a creature we are told is nothing but pure darkness, choose to save a human's life. Without conditioning, without memory, even a demon can choose mercy." Alarian looked back at the antique store. "What's my plan, you ask?" He smiled faintly. "I plan to do it again." And that, my friends, is one hell of a first impression. Big thanks to Matt Looney for his strange and powerful tale. Got thoughts? Some theories? Let's hear them in the comments. And if you like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe share it with someone who needs a little weird in their life. Sweet dreams if you can find them, and I'll see you here next time.